keep adding, is it first dollar, I think, or something like that? It's
Oh.
supposed to be
Yeah, in case,
coming,
yeah, we need one of those.
I know every time I drive by, they just keep dropping off more and more.
Did you mean to say Chick-fil-A and just got it wrong?
I know.
You can start that right. Go track for a chicken pen.
Take one for the spread.
Okay, good afternoon. It is 3 p.m. and we will go ahead and call the regularly scheduled meeting of the Hutchinson Utilities Commission to order. Commissioners, do we have any conflicts of interest to declare?
None.
None. We will move to the consent agenda. Any items that a commissioner would like to pull out of there?
I'll make a motion to approve. Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Matt and second by Troy. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll move right into the financial statements. Jared.
I'll start by mentioning cash went up $879,000 between the two divisions. If you remember last month, we talked about the reimbursement from Heartland Corn hit revenue in March, but the cash would hit in April, so that's $752,000 of that. On the electric side, we are down a little. Part of that is city invoiced us for 2023 expenses. If you remember the water tower project where our meter reading equipment went down. So those expenses came through. So that's about $56,000 on the electric side. So that increased the operating expenses quite a bit. Other than that, I think everything else was pretty similar on the electric side. On the gas side, that same invoice from the city, $33,000 of that was for the gas. And then there's also $44,000 for the pipeline DOT regulations every year. That was paid in June the year before. So that was up. So that's $77,000 extra in operating expenses right there. And then 22% lower on the heating days, so that was part of why consumption was down. That's all I have.
Yeah, really it was so much either, just obviously you guys can see the consumption's down on both sides. You know, the electric side through year to date is pretty close to even. You know, we're just 0.17% off. The piece that probably is a bigger piece to keep in mind is when you look at the overall year to date, it's pretty even, but when you look at the difference between the classes, I think that's the more important point. Obviously, you guys know the residential and the small general, large customers, there's more margin there as far as how our rates are set up. So when we're less consumption in those classifications, that has a bigger impact on the financial statements relative to the industrial class. You guys recall their industrial class rate is set where there's not a lot of margin there. So even though their usage is up and it's offsetting some of the reduction in consumption in the other classes, it does have a negative impact on the financial statements just because of the rates, how they're set. So hopefully they're talking about this is supposed to be the 5th warmest summer on record. So if that holds true, we'll start getting into a better position on the electric side through the summer months. If it holds true, we'll see how it trends. Some of the usage for some of our customers that had been down, you know, either through remodeling or major modifications, those companies are back up online now. So we've started to see their usage tick back up. Not quite near where they were a couple of years ago. So some of those processes probably aren't in full swing on some of our manufacturing like they were, but they are starting to ramp back up. So that's a good sign that they're kind of getting back to some normalcy on that. Otherwise, I thought everything else was trending how I thought it would be relative to the weather. As Jared mentioned, there's the timing on paying our assessments on the gas side. It's just the timing between a couple different months. Otherwise, you know, things just to kind of watch, just to kind of see how consumption goes moving forward. Warm winter, and I'll touch a little bit on that kind of in my comments just on our imbalance. But otherwise, things are starting to stabilize a little bit more. So nothing really else really to share. I think it's pretty consistent. So.
Okay. Any questions for Jeremy or Jared?
Nope.
I make a motion to approve the financial statements.
I'll second it. Motion by Kathy, second by Anthony. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next is the open forum. I do not see any visitors here today, so we'll move right into communication with the city administrator. Matt.
Not a whole lot. We're in the start of construction season with all of our street projects. So you can see those throughout town. The fun things, the pool opens on June 5th. And if you want to run for city council, the deadline is Tuesday. So that's it.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Divisions? Dan?
We had a transformer trip last night at a substation which caused a partial outage in town. We determined that it's a faulty sensor that caused it to trip. Looks like there's been some moisture getting in there over time, and so we'll have to replace that sensor, but that was the reason for the outage last night.
Okay.
So it's there to protect the transformer, but it is.
Suppose that's going to happen from time to time.
Shouldn't, but his factory wiring was all from the factory like that. I don't know, the fittings were all tight, but water does its thing. Sometimes it gets into spaces it's not supposed to.
Waters or squirrels, right?
All right, thank you. Dave?
Nothing new here.
Mike?
Nothing new.
Just mention that you had one account coordinator retire on the 17th, and then the new one started on the 23rd, so we're back to full right away. That's all I have.
Good. All right, Jeremy? You want to be regular Jeremy or natural gas Jeremy first?
Could be both, I suppose. Just working on some regulatory compliance stuff on the natural gas side. So Bryce and Justin and I have been working with Renegade, the consulting firm that you guys hired a couple months ago. So we're working through a lot of our regulatory manuals, updating things that need to be updated. Obviously, we'll be adding some additional language with Heartland Corn and their lateral. We also are working on a farm tap that's going in down by Heartland Corn. So we have to add some language in some of our manuals to be in compliance with PHMSA and MinOps. So we're working through some of that with those guys. We'll talk about the Elm 6000 when it gets down to the new business. Been working with that. Mike kind of alluded to the natural gas division where we've just had a warm winter. You know, we've been carrying gas in the pipeline, so I've been working with Northern Border and BP on trying to resolve some of the imbalances on the pipeline and some solutions to that. I think there's some concerns I have, at least as far as Northern Border's reporting and what's allocated to us at the Trimont station. Whether that's a downstream issue where they just can't get us gas, or if it truly is that our gas pipeline is full of gas and we can't push any more gas in the pipeline. So we do need to start resolving the imbalance that we have in the pipeline. Obviously, as it gets in the winter, that becomes more critical because there needs to be space in the pipeline to flow gas for heating. So I've been working a lot with those guys to try to address the imbalances and some solutions for that. Working on the prepaid deal, we'll touch a little bit on that, working through that piece. Also working with some of our customers on purchasing some additional commodities for the future. 25, 26, and 27, our largest customer needs to procure some volumes. So we're working through some hedging strategies for that. But I told them they really need to start watching the futures pricing. This might be as low as it gets out in those years for a while. With some things coming out, some headwinds just with Freeport LNG station coming on line down in the Gulf. That's going to be coming back online, so there will be export pressures to export natural gas globally, which will put upward pressure on pricing. That's one of the things coming forward. Manufacturers are reducing production of natural gas because the pricing is so low, and so they're arbitrarily trying to push down supply because there is oversupply right now. They're well above the 5-year average. We'll see how disciplined those rigs can be, because a lot of those companies, depending on the quality of their balance sheet, if they don't have a lot of cash on the balance sheet, they're going to be forced into, doing production so that they can make revenue somehow. So we'll see how disciplined they can be. And then just the forecast of a hotter summer is putting already some upward pressure on potential increased pricing on the commodity side of things, just because I think there will be a lot of generation needed for the summer, and natural gas is going to be a big dispatchable generation for heating and electrical load. So those three things are kind of foreseeable things that would put pressure on the price of natural gas to go up. So if you're looking at buying some futures right now, now is a good time to start at least inquiring about what those pricing structures are. I'm typically seeing anywhere from the upper 3s to 4, 370 to 4 is kind of where the pricing is, so that's not too bad. Obviously, the spot market pricing right now is like about 45, so it's extremely cheap right now, but if you're locking and hedging down the road, you're not gonna get that pricing, so. So we're working on a little bit of that. June 6th, Arts Place, next Thursday, we have MMUA coming out for one of their regional meetings. A couple of you have signed up for it. If you haven't signed up for it and you want to come, it's a good way to meet some of the MMUA staff, to get a little education about what's going on legislatively as it relates to the energy industry in the state of Minnesota. And that's just kind of a networking thing. They hosted one at Litchfield last year that I think some staff members went to. They've hosted one down in New Ulm, and so they're going to do one in Hutchinson and hopefully get some of the surrounding communities, some of their elected officials, some of their commissioners that sit on their boards, and some staff to come. So if you're interested, it's free. Come on out. It's from 5 to 7 at Arts Place on Thursday. And then just working through, starting to get some things ready for the audit. MinOps is coming out here in June to do a couple audits on the natural gas side. So we're going to start working on answering questions, getting things formulated for the inspector to come out, and then we got to start working on a couple more audits coming up August 12th week. So I've got 2 or 3 more that month as well. So we're kind of in the audit season. So just working through a lot of those things.
It's quite a bit. Next, we have Human Resources and Angie.
Like Jared mentioned, we finished at the account coordinator position. A few weeks ago, we also hired a new welder service person, so we're full staff over there. And now just working on hiring 2 seasonal temps.
Very good.
Yeah.
Mark, anything on the legal front?
Nothing today.
Very good. Anything else to add, Jim?
That's it.
Okay. Thank you. Policies, looks like we had quite a few up for review, but no changes. And then we do not have any unfinished business. So it takes us right to the new business, approved Hutchinson substation circuit breaker contract, which is Dan's.
Yeah, if you remember earlier this year, we went out for bids for circuit breakers for the Hutchinson substation project. We received 3 bids in order states, came in lowest with the Siemens circuit breakers, and contract's back. We're looking to execute that today and get that off to once we get our order in for those circuit breakers.
Looks like their turnaround time was kind of where you were expecting at this point.
Actually, Tuesday, yesterday, got an update. I guess now that there's a contract on the table, they moved it up to early next spring for delivery.
Oh.
It's funny how that works.
Yeah.
So it went from late next fall, or 2026 fall, to spring 2025, magically. It might beat the transformer.
Well,
good to have it in inventory, I guess, right?
Yeah, that's fine, as long as it's on site.
we're due for something to go in our favor.
Don't worry, I'll bounce that out later.
Dan, what did you estimate the price to be? It's coming in at $761,000.
I don't think I have that with me, but I know it was higher than, I don't know if you remember, Jeremy. Off the top of my head, I don't recall.
Yeah, I think one of the breakers was 10% higher, and the other one was 15.
Yeah.
Okay.
About there.
And we get our return back based on what the final price is. It all
Yeah.
washes out in the end, right?
Yeah, and I think I sent you guys the latest estimate. Kind of the project now is up to 13.4,
Yeah, I think it's
13.5 million. It started out at 8, and it was up to 10 something. Now it's 13.5. A lot of it is they went out and got some additional quotes out of the site work, more kind of firm quotes, and that was the biggest. I think particularly that added about 700,000 site work, and then I think there was some additional equipment materials that was another couple $100,000. So I do need to get back into based on what our conversation points are with the LM6000, what option we want to go, and then update the cash flow model for you guys, because obviously the transmission project is increasing in cost, and potentially LM6000 could increase in cost. So we need to take a relook at that before we look at financing structures. Again, to Anthony's point, everything on the transmission project is recoverable from the market, from MISO. It's just is the lag time and the timing to get that money reimbursed to us. So that will be recoverable. So it's just more of the timing and the cash flow than it is that it's an outlay of cash that we're not going to recover. So But I'll get some of that stuff updated for you guys, so you can take a look at it.
Any other questions on the circuit breakers?
Make a motion to approve the contract with Border States for the purchase of Siemens 115 kV and 69 kV circuit breakers.
Second.
Motion by Anthony and second by Matt. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item, we have the request 009912 for the fiberglass service body. That's Dave's.
Yeah, part of our fleet management program, we are due to replace the 2012 Ram. We ordered that chassis back in December, and then now that's confirmed, ordered, and will be delivered, we want to get the service body for it ordered. So this is to approve. It is a state bid item as well. So this would be approved direct for the service body for the replacement truck.
It's pretty straightforward. Any questions for Dave on that one?
I make a motion to approve rec number 009912 with the fiberglass service body.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Kathy and second by Troy. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Then we have Jeremy, approval of the buyer's authorization for resolution 24-01, short-term natural gas prepaid deal.
So several of you were around when we first entered into our first prepaid deal back in 2018. At that time, PEAK, which is the Public Energy Authority of Kentucky, they're a municipal or a joint agency that can issue tax-exempt bonds, kind of like MMGA or the Minnesota Community Energy. So they went on and issued short-term bond or 30-year bonds to pre-purchase gas for 30 years for some of the customers that participated in that deal. At that time we got into that deal back then, the board at that time didn't feel comfortable locking into a 30-year pre-purchase gas supply contract. They felt more comfortable getting into a shorter-term deal, and so PEAK and BP accommodated HUC in getting into a shorter-term deal that would essentially pre-purchase gas for the first, in this case, 8 years until they went out and repriced the bonds through a remarketing period. And so that time is coming up. November 2024 is our last month of being in the prepaid deal. If you recall, in that short-term deal, we were getting 6-cent discount. The people that were in the long-term deal were getting 29 to 30-cent discount. So obviously you lose a premium if you're only staying in for a shorter period of time. So that's coming up. They have asked us if we would like to get into the remarketing period again. So what's in front of you guys today is kind of moving forward with under the intention that we would get back into the same structure that we're in. They're going to reprice the bonds. They think there's a better spread there now between the tax-exempt financing and the taxable financing, and that's where you get the discount is the margin of the spread between taxable and non-taxable financing. So they're offering us a 10-cent discount on a short-term deal again. They anticipate the remarketing period on the new bonds being roughly in that 8-year time frame as well. So if we entered into this contract for prepaid gas for the next 8 years, we could anticipate coming back in 2032 roughly to decide if we want to stay in a prepaid deal with a gas discount. Their intention is to kind of wrap up the documentations and the approval from all the counterparties that are in the deal by the end of June at the latest, and then go out to the market and issue bonds in the first part of July. We are what they call a qualified participant because we're a municipal government. They need a certain amount of load in these prepaid deals in order to issue tax-exempt financing. So they need us as much as we can get a discount on that. So that's one of the reasons why they want to keep us in the deal. One of the other things that we've talked about is they're able to, and I'm waiting to get back language that Mark and I can take a look at, but they have offered an agreement or a suggestion on putting our full 100% of our prepaid volumes that we currently have in this deal. And at the time that I sit on the MCE board, we're also looking to do a prepaid deal where there's bigger discounts in that deal. We anticipate that at the time that we would go out to finance prepaid bonds and that type of deal, we can move some volumes of the prepaid peak deal into that deal if we wanted to. It's an option that they would give us. For us, there's no risk. We can put 100% of our volumes in right now, and then if something materializes with a second prepaid deal through Minnesota MMGA, we could move some volumes. What I've told BEP and what I've told them is I'll allocate 65% of our prepaid volumes that we're currently doing into the peak prepaid deal in a shorter term kind of structure at 8 years at the 10-cent discount. The other 35%, which equates to about 1,000 decatherms a day on average, we may want to move into a second prepaid deal with maybe a longer term where we can get 30, 40, 50 cent discount and then blend the overall cost savings down. So they're creating a mechanism that would allow us to do that if we want to. So I'm not sure when that one will happen. We've been working on that prepaid deal for about a year now. We're starting, the struggle that we're getting is we're having a hard time getting that second deal done because of the loads. We can't get enough load to go and actually issue bonds. RBC, Goldman Sachs, those big financial institutions want to issue, in that realm of $600 to $750 million worth of bonds in order to make the structure work. So until you get enough load, 30-year load that is large enough to issue that type of volume of bonds, you have to kind of wait on those. So we've been working on one. Sounds like on the second deal, they got Hibbings committed to getting into a prepaid deal. Moving forward, they're talking about Duluth and a couple other municipalities. But I don't want to wait for that to happen either when Peak and BP, which is the deal that we're already in, is already going to be repricing there. So I think it's advantageous for us to take advantage of getting our volumes back in the deal, getting the discount now, and if something materializes down the road, I can come back to you and say, hey, here's another option where we can move some volume if we want. If we choose not to, we don't need to either. So again, there's no really risk to us of not taking advantage of what BP is willing to add into the contract. So what they're asking for today is having the commission approve a resolution, which is essentially saying you guys are willing to get into the short-term gas supply contract moving forward. There will be a certificate that will need to be signed eventually as well. Mark will need to provide his attorney opinion letter. It's essentially, we looked at the documents, roughly the same document this time as it was back in 2018. When we get closer to closing on the bonds. So that's kind of the structure that we're looking to go down. That's
This is on the shorter term one you said, right?
This is the shorter term one. I talked with a few of our counterparts, so Austin Utilities, they're doing exactly already what we're talking about doing. They've got some volumes in short-term contracts and some long-term contracts, and they blend them together. Owatonna Municipal, they're in all long-term stuff. New Ulm is in long-term stuff. So back in 2018, these were kind of the newer things. There wasn't a lot of municipalities doing those because I think a lot of it was the concern from the boards of getting into long-term contracts. There always is a mechanism in these contracts that if for some reason you can't take the prepay load, whether you maybe have a large manufacturer goes out of business, or all of a sudden you have a huge issue where you can't use the gas for some reason, either in generation or heating. There's always a buyback provision where they'll take it back and remarket it to other people. So that's a good thing, at least from our perspective in this deal, because BP is one of the largest natural gas suppliers in the country, so they have plenty of off-takers if for some reason we just can't consume the prepaid volumes. So that creates an added security level that, hey, we're not going to get stuck paying for something that we can't consume typically. So a lot of our counterparts are in the long-term stuff, but I think right now it's good getting back into the eight-year deal, get a little bit better discount. It does equate to the volumes right now. We're going to be somewhere between $50,000 to $70,000 savings on the 10-cent discount. Of course, if we get into something, we split some off into a longer term, eventually then that will blend up. Right now, it's an incremental savings that we're essentially doing nothing other than getting into the contract. So.
The other municipal utilities that you mentioned that have been doing longer term, are they satisfied with that? They've had good experience?
Yeah, it's been, well, I talked to Mark at Austin. He was hesitant about it at first. He's been there, he's a GM down there, but it's a seamless transition. So we essentially get, every month we get two bills. We get one bill from BP and we get one bill from Peak. And the bill that we get from Peak basically is just the discount amount that we get off of the BP bill. So it's a seamless transition. It's a monthly bill that comes every month. The volumes are supplied by BP. Peak is just the conduit to issue the bond, the financing, right? So it's been an easy transition. The only piece that I would say, if we split some volumes off, it just gets a little bit more administrative work on our end, because then we would have 3 bills instead of 2. Instead of Peak and BP, we'd have BP, Peak, and then an MCE discount. But it's been a seamless transition. The supplies are always firm supplies. And again, you got the mechanism, if you can't take load, that they get out of it. So they obviously don't want you to, so they want you to nom. We're putting these prepaid deals, the amount that you know that you're going to use, because they don't really want to turn back volumes. So in this deal right now, I have 62% of our total consumption is what would be going in this prepaid deal. Most of the other utilities are usually putting in 70-75%. So I did talk about the BP, but I said I feel comfortable with the 62. I don't want to do any more than that, particularly with this last winter. It's been warm. And so the more you put in the prepaid deal, sometimes the less flexibility you have to nom less and to keep our imbalance down. It wouldn't be as big of an issue if we didn't own the pipeline and we were just an off-taker off of someone else's pipeline, but because we own the pipeline and we have to balance the pipeline, we're going to be responsible for imbalances and getting things screwed up. So I think the 62% in a prepaid deal is a good amount that we can meet minimum quantities, get our discount, but yet provides us enough flexibility. If we have to reduce noms or have customers on the pipeline, help reduce the imbalance, we can do those things in concert with the prepaid deal. So
we have 62% of our consumption locked up in a prepaid then, and that'll all be with a 8-year prepaid contract, right, at a 10% discount.
Yep.
And then you can maybe choose, should we want to take 35% of that 62% and spin that into a longer term, more steeply discounted.
Correct.
Feels okay.
That mechanism isn't in this contract yet to get out.
No.
The longer term prepaid.
They're supposed to be putting the wording in. This was the draft that they gave us 2 weeks ago, so they're still working through that. The other piece that you won't see in this contract, on the back side, you see those exhibits. In a final contract, so this is just a draft that they sent with the resolution, there will need to be, the delivery point will need to be updated to say Trimont, because that's our delivery point. And then you see dates in the back, but the volumes aren't listed yet.
Right.
So that stuff all needs to be put in.
So the ask today is to approve the resolution, not the final contract.
Correct. They kind of go hand in hand, but you're essentially authorizing that you're going to get in the contract. But that document needs to be updated with those things, and they're still working through those numbers yet. I've provided them all the volumes, so I know what it's going to say in the back. But they just need to update that, and they need to work with their bond counsel and get the documents and stuff in order to be ready to go out, because they got to do bond disclosures, and they got rating calls, and there's things that they're going to have to do in June before they can even issue the bonds. So they'll be working through that in June. So
before those final contracts are executed, Mark will review those. You'll review them also for accuracy.
Yep.
Any other questions for Jeremy?
Make a motion to approve resolution 24-01.
Second.
Motion by Anthony and second by Kathy. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Gets us to the LM 6000.
You guys can't wait, huh?
I think at this point it'd be considered a saga.
So the last meeting we had, we talked a little bit about the LM 6000. I kind of gave you guys an update. The 2 pieces that came out of that meeting were a couple questions that the commission wanted answered. Is one, the insurability of the engine, either option that we go, and then 2, kind of the financial impacts, looking at some of those things in relation to how is the market going to view an engine that's out of service any longer than what we've already forecasted, which is through August. Just got off the phone this afternoon. We had a 1 o'clock phone call with Hartford, GE, our brokers, and us to talk about the insurability of option 1, which is getting our, moving forward with our engine, getting whatever we can get done on it and get it back in the service, or option 2, which is the engine exchange. I can tell you we haven't gotten any further than we were 4 weeks ago from the standpoint of Hartford. They're unable to make a decision on insurability in either option. The duty to warn, it really is concerning to them. They're not sure really what that means, as much as we've tried to explaining it to them. GE communicated today, the duty to warn is nothing than a letter saying that you haven't done all the NSRs that we've recommended you do. It doesn't mean it's not a serviceable engine. It's a piece of paper, it's a statement saying it's a duty to warn. But that's got them really nervous about what that means. My impression of going down our option is they're not going to insure that. I don't think there's any ability for them to say with any certainty that they're going to get enough detail that says, hey, we understand you've approved all these things, but you haven't approved these things, so we're going to insure that engine, knowing that there's a duty to warn on it, and there's some things that you just can't do. I mean, we've expressed multiple times, there's reasons why we haven't approved certain NSRs. One is either because it isn't going to come back anytime soon. Some of these things have 8 months lead time, year lead time. Or two, they just can't get the part. So it's not that we wouldn't approve it if the parts are available, but because they're not available, we can't approve it. So they understand that situation. They understand generally the condition of our engine. With option 2, which is the engine exchange, their comments are there's a more of a likelihood that we may insure it, but we can't give you a definitive answer until you guys make a decision on what option you're going down, and we get more documentation from GE on the hours on the engine, right? The start times on the engine. There was also communication that they know that this engine exchange is an older unit too and has hours on it. And GE has said, well, if we tear down any engine, we're going to find things that need to be replaced. We could tear down engine 186 and find a bunch of stuff that needs to be replaced. But we don't need to tear it down because we determine it's a serviceable engine. It's been maintained by GE. There's no reason to tear it down. So from GE's perspective, they communicated this engine's a serviceable engine. We're going to move the LPT from your engine to this engine. It's going to be fully repaired. We've got all the parts in inventory. This engine, from our standpoint, is a good engine to run. It's a serviceable engine. It's got a 2-year warranty, which is a year extended further than they normally would. So in GE's eyes, there is no duty to warn. This engine's good to go. From Hartford's standpoint, there's speculation on, yeah, that's good, but we also know it's an older engine. We know there's run times on it. And I get the sense that they don't really want to insure anything. So they're waiting for all this additional detail to tell them, there's a reason why we don't want to insure this thing. So GE is going to try to provide them additional information this afternoon to give them some general comfort on that, but they said multiple times, we're not speculating on which way we're going to go. We're going to talk with their engineers. When their engineers say, well, we're going to talk with the underwriters, and then the underwriters say, well, we're going to talk to legal. And so they're not really looking to make a decision, is the impression I'm getting, until we make a decision. And I point blank, so I said, our board needs to make a decision because we need to know which direction we're going. So if our board says we're going the engine exchange, and if there's a 2-year warranty on it, there's no duty to warn, what other additional information do you need to tell us if you're going to insure it or not? And they said, you need to give us all the records. Give us all the records of all the parts, everything that's been done on it. So.
Is that reasonable? No. Doesn't feel like it, but I don't know.
We'll see what they can supply. The conversation I had 4 weeks ago with them is they're not going to get enough. I don't feel like they're going to get enough information that's going to suffice them making what they feel is an informed decision about the insurability of the piece.
Even if they do get enough information, they'll say they didn't get enough information. That's what you're saying.
That's the way I got it today. Is that how you? That's exactly how you took it too, right?
So given the age of these engines and value and our long-term plan, what's the worst case scenario if we don't get insured on the engine itself?
We'd have to be self-insured.
Yeah, we'd have to self-insure it. I mean, if something happened and we still needed that certain, let's take a step back. We would have to insure it, but if something went wrong with the engine, we're probably never putting it back in service. Because part of the issue that we're running into, and GE will tell you, when you have to tear down an engine, there's things that we just don't have parts for them anymore. So if it's something that you may have available, they may have available, or they can cannibalize from another engine, you may get something back in service. But if it's something that they just don't support anymore,
In the LM6000, there's fewer and fewer and fewer
Right.
as time goes on, right?
right?
So going down that road, then how valuable is that insurance? I mean, the replacement cost was complete loss, but it wouldn't help us get it back up and running.
Because there wouldn't be any replacement.
Right.
There's just no replacement parts.
I would say, generally speaking, with Hartford on the replacement, so they would already have a general basis for replacement costs. So let's assume we go down the path that we do the engine exchange. They've already seen the proposal from GE, so GE's valued that engine exchange at $4.4 million. So they would give us a replacement cost of probably not any more than that, and it would decrease as time goes on that. And then we would have our $1 million deductible that we'd have to pay first. So even if we got that engine today, in my mind, and it was a catastrophic failure, and they said, yeah, we can't, this thing's got to be scrapped, you just can't repair this thing, the most we would probably get is $3.4 million from them after a $1 million deductible.
Well, in the first 2 years under warranty.
Correct.
So really, we're getting an insurance policy from GE for 2 years.
Right. At least as far as workmanship. Now, again, the constraint we're still going to have is if there's something under warranty and this thing has to come out, or it stays here and we can come fix it, but they can't get the part for 8 months or 6 months.
And we have a contract.
Right. So I don't think in either case, either option is ever going to eliminate that exposure, that the availability of keeping this thing in service if something really goes awry, or I think you could have that potential in either of those options,
Right.
just because of the lack of procuring available parts for a PA model.
And we're thinking about this unit in a 5-ish year lifespan, 7-ish year lifespan. And, well, if we get past that, we're fortunate, kind of thing.
I think it depends on, I think either case, the way we run these, I think they could last longer than 5 years.
I mean, if we think about it at a 5 or 7 year payback, 5 and 7 year expectation of the life of the asset, and we get 15 out of it, even better, right? So we're probably not going to lock it up with 20-year capacity contracts if we have a kind of a shorter term horizon on that specific generating asset.
Right.
So as long as, maybe just for conversation's sake, I'd say if we see the business logic and everybody's comfortable with the engine exchange and we can get this thing up and running, and we feel comfortable that we can keep it running. I think where you're going with one of your questions is, what good is the insurance policy if you basically don't get anything covered anyways, and you got a 2-year warranty? Maybe we don't get insurance. Maybe we don't get insurance on it. It doesn't mean it's going to blow up. It just means that Hartford can't get comfortable with it.
Do we have any estimates on insurance? Or guess
On what we're paying on that?
what it would cost for insurance?
We currently have the same unit insured, so we could
we do?
probably. I mean, it's an older one, but
Yeah, I asked them specifically what our premium cost is for that unit. They don't break it out. They base their insurance premiums on valuation. Of course, they could do the calculation because they know what that's valued at. But our total premium is about $200,000 a year, and I would say, Terry, if you had to guess, would you say a third? I would say 60 to 70,000 is probably that unit alone.
Surely if you self-insure over a 5-year period that we would have gotten out of it in 2 years, it's already covered. Now we're halfway to $4 million.
I think when I think about uninsured, there's probably 2 aspects of it. There's a financial calculation payback, and then there's a liability side.
Well, and to me, that'd be the most concerning thing is, would the failure to not have this unit insured jeopardize any other coverage that we have for property damage, workers' comp, anything like that? And I don't know the requirements of those other policies off the top of my head, but...
And I'll answer that question, it's no. So we've heard from the league that there is no like, so even if we went our duty to warn, hey, your workers' comp is still covered, fire coverage, general liability coverage, that's in place no matter which option we go down. There's no lapse of coverage on the league side. It's just, do we feel comfortable that there may be a lapse on the equipment coverage for that
Actual
unit
equipment
if they
lapse.
decide not to cover it? Because even when GE said, we're providing a 2-year warranty, we were all thinking, they were going, yeah, we feel like, yeah, okay, 2-year warranty, so you're gonna back it, we'll insure it. But they can't even get comfortable with the 2-year warranty, because when I read between the lines, they're concerned of the age of the unit that we'd be buying is relatively in the age of ours. And so, just kind of thinking about it, if they found all these things that they're saying they need to be replaced on ours, what really should be replaced on the 186, even though you're not tearing it apart and you're calling it a serviceable engine? That's what they're having a hard time wrapping their head around, is what's the likelihood that something could go wrong on either situation. So they're trying to mitigate the risk, but they feel like they don't have enough information to make that determination. We have mentioned multiple times that we need to keep in the scope of this conversation that we're not looking to keep this thing for 30 years or get to major overhauls. We're looking to run it 500 hours next 4 or 5 years. And so there's a cost versus payback in their analysis on that piece. And I thought Brian did a good job of representing us to say, this is a municipal utility. They have fiduciary responsibilities not to, they want to do the right thing and keep good things, but we're not just going to throw money around either. And you guys need to make decisions so that they can make the best informed decision. Unfortunately, we're not going to get there on either case. So it's really going to come down to you guys, which I don't like putting you guys in that spot, but you're going to have to make a decision before these guys are going to make a decision.
So we have 3 options, right? We try to bring our original engine back, which we don't know if it can actually go back together and work.
Right.
We still don't even know that, right?
So let's talk about that option. So the option 1 was get our unit back. So there are a couple other concerning factors with that, which we touched a little bit on. When we've asked them, if we do our option now and you just start working on this thing, get our unit back, and we're not doing any other option, do what you need to do to get it back, will we have this thing back by August? Because if you recall, we had to go out and procure capacity in the auction through the summer season. Their response is, it's not likely. Best case would be September, October. Mike and I don't have a warm feeling that thing's coming back in September, October. Why that's important is what we found out when we've talked with other counterparties, Dan and I, is if this thing is out, we've taken it out of service with the market, the longer we keep it out of service, the more likelihood they're going to derate that engine. So when August comes, September comes, we're probably somewhat safe. We start getting into October, November, December, where this thing's been out for a significant amount of time, they use a formula to derate generation. So we know that will happen if we don't get our unit back anytime soon. What we can't really pin down is how much would they derate that 45 megawatt unit-ish. Would it be 20 megawatts? Would it be 5? Because it really is based on the type of dispatchable unit, the circumstances surrounding the unit, a seasonal accreditation changes. So every season your grading changes as well based on what's in the market. So I can't even give you an intelligent answer like, hey, if we get this thing back in December, we're going to lose 20 megawatts.
Do you know for how long that decrease would?
And there's a 3-year average on that. So when they start derating you, that stays in place for 3 years until you come back out of that. Now, I did talk with New Ulm. So they're in that 3-year rolling derated average now because they've had some different circumstances. So they've had some opportunity loss because they've had to do the same thing we had to do is what they've got derated, they've had to reallocate their generation to their contracts and go out and purchase their own capacity to suffice certain regulatory requirements. She doesn't know if their derated will ever come back to where it was before they got into a couple of those concerns that they had down there. But we have heard consistently, it'll be in place for 3 years. Kind of works like workers' comp. You have incident utilizations that you have to then show and prove that that thing is back to being a reliable dispatchable unit. But there will be a rolling 3-year average. My concern with that is you play that out 3 years, well, that takes you, over halfway through the remaining capacity contracts we have. Because if they start derating it this year, we'll have a 25, 26, 27, where we will have derated generation if we get it back in December. If it takes longer, we may not get it back, or it may be derated more. And then we're on the back side of 28.5 of 29 left of capacity. So to me, that's the bigger exposure is how does that get derated? How much opportunity cost we have, because now we have to reallocate generation and either buy capacity or reallocate it.
And we don't even know if it'll work.
Right.
It'll fit back together.
If there's an engine exchange, does it happen faster?
They're telling us it will. They're saying, yep, no problem, by August we'd have it back. We've told them they need to start working on the LPT.
So they guarantee that?
I'm sure we can write
They
in
said they
the
would,
contract.
I don't,
I try to.
they would
We can
try.
try to write in the contract.
Right.
This engine is ready to go? Why would it take so long to get it up here?
So they're using the LPT out of our engine, they're rebuilding it, that's 6 weeks, and once that's done, they gotta slam it in, and then it'll come out, and they gotta commission it here, and then we'll be good to go.
And then what was the net number on that? 2.8?
So, in option 1, we're roughly around 2 million. By the time we're at 1.7 million, but there's some additional NSRs that need to be done. So that'll put us, option 1 will put us around $2 million.
We spend $2 million to be uncertain about it.
Right. And less likelihood of insurability. Let's just be honest, they're not gonna insure that thing. Option 2, which is the engine exchange, that's 4.4 million. So it's an additional 2.4 million, roughly more than option 1. We scrapped the other option where we would look to procure a mid-shaft because we're going to spend the $650,000 to get the mid-shaft, which has corrosion potentially on it, which would have to go through the NDT test, which they can't do. So they're going to put a duty to warn on that as well. So why spend the money on a mid-shaft? The duty to warn's going to be there anyway.
But we get a trade value for trading in our engine, right?
Yeah, so that he calls it, we're giving you 800,000 credit on the LPT because they're using our LPT. So they're going to give us credit. It's going to cost, because we already approved $810,000 to do the oil leak repairs. So they're going to basically credit us that. And then, so at the end of the day, we're going to pay $4.4 million for it. But they're giving us some value on it. And then they said they would kind of wipe away all the NSR stuff because we're going with a different unit. And they would absorb whatever costs they have into it right now.
If we do an engine exchange, 'cause it feels like my gut tells me this is where we're going, right? If we do an engine exchange, and we're confident in that unit, Mike, Jeremy, we'll get it up, we'll get it running, and it'll be like the LM6000 we had.
Should be.
Yeah, nothing, no reason that you're aware of to think differently, with a 2-year warranty.
Right.
It's mechanical parts, I can't guarantee that, but yeah, should be,
right?
good to go.
Because the way this all seems like it's running is that option 1's not feasible. Spending money on things we don't even get it back.
It lose quite a bit.
So 2, we get this engine exchange, or 3, we just don't replace it.
I mean, there are other options, much more expensive ones.
Well, but they're 3 years down the road for implementation.
Probably more.
For if you're going to get new CAT engines or
Right, I mean, you're just,
But we still don't know.
We
which
lose the
route
capacity
we'll
issue.
exchange.
Correct. Yeah, we just need to be, if either option we go on, we just need to know that at the end of the day, they may not insure it anyway, and we have to be comfortable with it. Now, it doesn't mean that I can't go out and solicit other insurance companies to see if they would insure it.
There are things we can do internally to set aside reserve funds or restricted funds or whatever to prepare ourselves for that uninsured event if that were to happen. So we can,
And that insurance is just for the engine.
just for the physical asset itself.
Correct.
So we have 2 insurance carriers, League of Minnesota Cities on all the other stuff, and then the actual asset
Correct.
Equipment,
So,
insurance is
yeah.
through Hartford.
So when we talk about Hartford, we talk about all of our, like, assets that the league won't cover. That's why we have additional coverage, is the league doesn't get into this type of business. So all of our units, we have under Hartford Steam, we've got substations and transformers, you know, specialized equipment in the energy industry, those types of things. We've got our pipeline, our regulator stations, all those things are covered under Hartford Steam because they're not insured by the league. The league covers fire and water damage, general liability coverage, fleet like vehicles, workers' comp. They're part of, you know, that coverage. But when it comes into specialized like pieces of equipment, they don't get into that realm. And a lot of people don't get in that realm because it's a tough business to insure, because the assets are super expensive and there's variability in those things. So there's only a couple major players in that industry that will insure that type of equipment. And so we're using Hartford for a lot of that. And I think we got, what, 80 million, 70 million worth of assets insured under that.
And we would shop it around probably for next year anyway.
Yeah.
We haven't been getting any quotes.
It seems like it would be difficult for them not to insure it if we were to purchase it, have a 2-year warranty, have it in place and operational. You know, I think that's what they want to see before they're actually going to commit to anything, which is difficult when you're trying to make a decision on whether you spend $4 million to buy something.
Right.
Is there a value on capacity? Losing that, say we do start to decline?
Yeah, so our capacity right now, so
We have to supply it.
Yep. Our contracts right now, so for this year, 24-25, so the planning year goal is kind of mid-year to mid-year. 24-25, we've got just under 1.8 million in revenue coming from capacity sales. And then for 25-26, in those last 5 years, it's 1.6 million. So if we get derated some, by trying to wait for our unit to come back, we potentially lose a portion of that revenue. In addition to that, the contractual party that we're in contract with, if they have to go out and buy capacity and it's more expensive than our contract price with them, not only do we lose the revenue, but then we have to pay the difference for what it costs them to go and buy the capacity. So there's also an expense component to it as well. Now this time around, like this year, we were okay because they went out to auction and bought their deficiency off the auction. The auction pricing was cheaper than what our contract is with them, but we lost the revenue side of it.
Which was how much a month?
So we lost for that. We lost $114,000 for the summer for the 3 months, and then we had to buy. HEC had to buy some capacity because with that unit up, we were short regulatory, and so that cost us $105,000. So for the 3 months, using the auction pricing, it's going to cost us $219,000 between what we had to spend to buy capacity for us and then what AEP isn't giving us in revenue.
The real inherent value to having that on ready is the fact that it's got the capacity and it's sitting there. You don't even have to start it.
Right. The other piece that I quantified outside of the 219 is we usually generate market sales off of that one, and we've been averaging about $500,000 a year in margin. So without that, we're losing that potential market sales as well. Physical energy. So it's, I mean, it could be sizable.
It's $500,000 to $1 million a year.
And really, we're only talking about 2.4 million.
We're already in for 2. We're talking about another 2.5. I think, right, Jimmy?
Correct.
I think there's the risk here is not getting it back before we get derated. I mean, that's my largest concern.
That's
I think
mine too.
It makes any money we're spending on this thing, we get it back in a very short period of time. If we decide just to not replace the engine, that exposure until 2029 is real. I mean, the lost revenue.
Yeah, we got to do something. That's far. If we came down to that, we would. To me, it's a number you have to do the engine exchange. You can't afford not to have the generation.
And I think we need to make a decision.
I would agree with that. So, Jeremy, your recommendation would be?
The cleanest to avoid risk of the market issues and the insurability is the engine exchange. That's the cleanest that gives us the best opportunity to get it back in service It's more expensive, but it gets us back in service. It alleviates the issue with the market and the D rating. That's a 3-year average. It also gives us back generation quicker than we may not get, so you can build that back with market sales and other things. That's the most economic. Long term, I look at the big picture, that's the cleanest option
And fastest.
and fastest.
I don't want to sound insensitive to $2.5 million, but $2.5 million into $80 million in physical assets, and this utility was 3%. I'm talking about 3% of our asset base. It's $2.5 million, so you can't ignore that, but it's 3%.
I think when you look at the insurance aspect too, you can say the same thing. It's a relatively small investment. You know.
Even if we self-insure.
Right.
Correct.
I think if you follow that up with an increase in the amount of money we reserve for catastrophic issues, you're definitely compensating for the risk down the road. If we go this route, Mark, are we violating anything as far as contracts or getting bids or anything along the route that we're
From a purchasing perspective?
right from the exchange side?
Yes, we did talk about that. So the options are so the cleanest option, the quickest option is they would have to go on one of those joint purchasing sites like Sourcewell. They're willing to do that. As I said, time is of the essence. If we have to publicly bid something, we may not meet the August deadline with engine exchange. So we said public utility can go on joint action purchasing sites because those were already been vetted. Those sites have been vetted for the lowest cost price of assets, vehicles, equipment. So they're willing to go down that path to help expedite getting an engine back in service. We'd have to put the proposal out there and they would have to bid on it, but they are willing to do that. They've talked with their attorneys. Mark and I had talked about the cleanest option to do that. So that would be the route we would go down, is we'd go to one of those purchasing sites.
And then we're covered.
Yep.
Are you comfortable with that?
I might just take some administrative to kind of coordinate all that stuff and timing and things, but
It's probably our best option in your opinion?
it's the quickest option.
It's not perfect, but probably the best.
Does anybody have any opposing viewpoints?
No, I don't think we can wait any longer.
No, I think this every month. I think we
The
just
saga.
we need to get this thing moving.
The process with TV has been so frustrating.
I don't think it's the best option, but I think it's the best option with what we are looking at right now. You know,
So your ask for the commission is to give you a recommendation on how to proceed?
If you're comfortable doing it, yeah, I would like to just make a decision, move forward. But you guys got to be comfortable. You guys are the ones going to make the decision. So
I'll make a recommendation or a motion to proceed with the engine exchange as we've discussed.
Can we add 2 caveats to that?
As many as we think we need to, I think. And Mark, if you think we need to add some additional verbiage to our language, can
Sure.
I ask you to speak up and modify?
Sure, let's hear it.
2 things I'd like to include there would be trying to get a guarantee of delivery by August, the end of August, and that management will do our best attempt to ensure to have the machine insured. I think those should be included in the path, realizing that insurability might not be there.
And then develop an alternative plan if we can't. Whatever that means.
Plan A and a plan B, plan C. What do we need to add, Mark?
I think that basically says it. I mean, Jeremy knows that the intent is to do the engine exchange, try to get it insured if possible, and take it from there.
And meet a deadline. I would make a motion to pursue the engine exchange and work our tail off to get it insured and try to write in the agreement with GE that we can meet the August 1st deadline that Jeremy and Mike are working towards.
That's your motion?
Second.
All right.
what she said.
We have a motion by Anthony, a second by Troy. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
While I have this in my head, I think we should talk about giving them some intermediate term things to think about. I if we think this is a 20-year asset, we might be kidding ourselves. So I think we have to know that in 5 to 10 years, we probably have to have a CapEx budget in place, So start thinking about that whenever you think you need to. I know your focus needs to be on getting this thing up and running, and then probably catch your breath and think about what that means in 5 and 10 years from now. And if that means a new facility and a bunch of different styles of engines or whatever, I think we got to start engaging that plan.
I would agree.
Because what you guys just went through, we can't ask you to do again.
No.
And at that point, next generation options might be very viable. So,
Yeah, this is kind of a bridge to something different, whatever that looks like. So
I think you got to be ready to pull the trigger on maybe something like 5 years or 7 years or 10 years. And it might take you a few years to get that plan figured
Yeah,
out.
it will.
So,
all right.
everybody good with that? Jeremy, comfortable?
Yep, I am.
And maybe a ribbon cutting ceremony.
We can have one when the new one comes.
I think when the truck comes through town, we should hold the ribbon across and let the truck go through.
With the white flag.
Thank you.
Pay
guys.
attention to the newspaper, you guys can explain it to them.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Thank you for everybody's work on that. I know there's some heartburn and heartache and whatever else, but it's not for lack of you guys working hard on it.
And we appreciate you guys too making a decision. Those aren't easy. And didn't get all the questions answered that we wanted, but
Something I already know, but.
The only thing that moves slower than GE as a large insurance company, I think, is what we found out.
we just had that conversation. And sometimes it's better not to ask, but you got to do your due diligence, and you can't.
Yeah.
You got to be transparent. You got to.
Chances are pretty good Buffett owns both of them.